Finally, a man who can satisfy two women at once. Welcome, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. This time I'm coming at you to review a movie. It'll be interesting to see how many views this video gets. Coming at you to review a movie that I saw pretty much after it came out. I think my dad and I went to a second run theater and saw this at the second run theater. So this movie's been a part of my life ever since basically it came out in 1987, I want to say. I don't know, I mean, obviously it was my parents who introduced me, in the early to mid 80s to Steve Martin, and he was one of my first comic heroes as a kid. I really, really liked Steve Martin, and I think we recorded the Jerk Off TV sometime in the mid 80s or something. I don't know what my first Steve Martin movie would have been, but The Jerk was certainly one of them. I would have been too young to see the theatrical, because I think it's isn't that R-rated, The Jerk, I think? So I watched the one off TV, which was really convenient for, parents to be able to do back in the day. Record a R-rated movie off TV, that way the kids could see the TV cut and it was all fine and dandy for the kid to see and things. So Steve Martin was an early, probably one of my first kind of actor heroes that I can remember thinking of, and I just, I really identified with Steve Martin and his humor and stuff. I can remember seeing Little Shop of Horrors, the remake with Rick Moranis, the musical one, in the theater. I actually saw that in the theater and loved Steve Martin's little cameo, and I'd acted out and things, probably to the soundtrack on cassette and stuff. So by the time Roxanne came out, I mean, I was a pretty big Steve Martin fan, and like I said, my dad and I saw it, I know for sure saw it at a second run theater. I can still remember the beginning of the movie and the fight with the two bullies with the skis and the ski poles, just how it echoed in the second run theater walls and stuff, and just how it sounded. And basically, for some reason, it just occurred to me the other night to just watch Roxanne, and I got this Blu-ray for, of all things, $3. I don't know if you can see that, on clearance years and years ago. This has got a 2015 sticker on it. Got the Blu-ray years and years ago, and incidentally, that looks really nice version of the movie. So it just occurred to me, just out of the blue, I'm just like, I should rewatch Roxanne. I watch it every now and then, and I checked my channel, my channel being over a decade old. I checked it, I typed Roxanne to make sure I didn't already review it, and turns out I did showcase the VHS a couple of years ago. So that's all, and I guess I never reviewed the movie. So I gotta tell you, first off the bat, I'm sure if you're a movie buff or buff of anything, even sports or video games or board games, role-playing games, voting, anything, if you like it as an adult and did it as a kid, or maybe you don't even like it as an adult, maybe if you did it as a kid and if you do it now, or if it could be music, like an album or a video game or a movie or a television show, but I gotta tell you, if you experience something at a particular point in your life where it's like, I don't know, it's just like, I don't know if this is one of probably the strongest time capsule, time warp movies for me. I've talked about before, if you experience a movie when you're a kid, doesn't matter how old you are as an adult, 20s, 30s, 40s, I'm not in my 50s yet, but I imagine it'll be the same if I make it there. Like, if you have a strong experience with the movie as a kid, and you'll experience that way, or those feelings will come back every time you watch it. I don't know, this is definitely like one of the strongest movies that there is for that. Something that was going around, something that was happening, and I probably was watching this, I'm not exactly, I think it came out on VHS in 87. It must have come out in the theater in early 87, it come out on VHS in 87 as well, but I'm pretty sure I watched this, we would have rented it and had 2 VCRs, and we would have been able to copy it back in the day. And I'm pretty sure I watched this ridiculously, over and over and over and over in 1988. And a lot of other stuff that was going on at that time was, when I watch this movie, I think of 2 things, or maybe 3 things. The movie American Ninja, because me and my buddy Willie were watching that a lot at the time, and we bought this really kind of cool, fancy schmancy. It was metal and glass, this gumball machine dispenser, and we'd keep it filled up with gumballs. And so when Willie would stay over, spend the night or whatever, we'd probably watch Roxanne, American Ninja, we'd dispense gumballs, and we'd play, the other thing that this movie reminds me of, we'd play Legend of Cage, the NES version, And that would, so it'd kind of be like this, circular thing. Roxanne, American Ninja would want us to make us want to play Legend of Cage on NES, and the whole time we're eating gumballs. But I gotta tell you, watching this movie, and what's funny about the music, like the opening, like, late 80s jazz tune, the do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do-do-do. It's funny because ever since I saw it, I always hated that music, and I always thought, like, we saw it in the theater, like a second run theater, so the movie was really new, and even then I thought, God, this is just almost like it was so old. It was just I hate. Is that a saxophone? It might be because it's a saxophone. I don't like saxophones, but the like the theme, the opening credits theme, and some of the music is there's not a lot of music in it, like original music. But I can always remember one thing about, I love this movie, but like I don't know if hate might be a strong word for the opening credits theme or whatever. I'm not fond of it, and I always had a disdain for it. But oh my God, when I played it, I watched it last night, the Blu-ray, and when I watched it, when it started, I'm just like, almost tears came to my eyes, like, just the beautiful clouds in the, and the sky and the clouds, and there's like dusk or whatever, or it could be dawn depending on the shooting schedule, but I think it's supposed to be dusk in the movie, and the pink, the pink font and the credits and stuff, and the music. I'm just like, oh my God, I was just teleported back to 1988, and I could almost taste the gumballs and almost see the Legend of Cage NES cartridge, sitting over there, and it's just like, oh my God. And the thing about this movie, being a child of divorce, or being a kid who has divorce in my history when I was a young kid, being a kid, depending on what kind of life, certainly I'm sure there's just droves and droves and droves of people that have had much worse childhood than I had. But, there's probably kids who have an easier childhood than I had as well. So, one thing that I can remember, and that's why the tears kind of almost started. They didn't flow, but I became kind of emotional when the movie started, because, like I say, it teleported me right back to '88, and a lot of things that were going on for me at the time was, just, divorced parents, and going back and forth, and school. Even though it was probably summer when me and Willie were having sleepovers and watching Roxanne, American Ninja, chewing gumballs and playing Legend of Cage. It was probably summer, but still, I mean, school was on the horizon, whatever. So, I mean, being just hating school, being a lousy student, not wanting to do the work, and the pressure to do the work, and just the stresses of just being a kid. It's a bummer, like, just the stress that's involved in life. But what I'm trying to say in a very long-winded way is that even way back then, in like probably summer 1988, this movie, a lot of movies, and this is probably the reason I'm a big, huge movie fan, is a lot of movies were comfort. They were comfort. You'd put it on and you could dip away from the worries and cares and troubles of your real life and be absorbed into the screen. And Roxanne was one of the biggest comfort movies. Like things like National Lampoon's Vacation was another one where you just put on. And a lot of times I can remember being so stressed as a kid that I know a lot of people do this, as adults. I don't do it anymore, but fall asleep to movies. I can remember falling asleep to National Lampoon's Vacation, recorded off TV, and it'd be the commercials, and you memorize the commercials, and the commercials even became like something of a comfort. So I mean, it's like just being in maybe the most ideal growing up kid situation. I mean, who's got the ideal growing up situation? But movies were a comfort and an escape for me, and I guess still are. But I think maybe more so. I don't know if I can say more so, but this movie was a huge comfort movie. And it was almost like when I started it, and even though I have a disdain for that opening credit music, it was almost like when the music started, the movie gave me a big hug and just like, it's okay. It's okay. And it was just unbelievable. I haven't even really talked about the movie yet, but I guess, what's important, maybe I'll talk little about the movie. I guess what's important about this review for me, I guess, is just more what the movie, I guess, meant and or meant slash means to me as a result of being in my life at the particular time of life that it was in. It was just unbelievable watching it. I've seen this movie so many times, not so much as an adult, but I saw it so much as a kid that as an adult it's just like just ingrained in my head. And another thing that I really loved about this movie as a kid, being like physically quote unquote different than most other people, is that I really identified with the Steve Martin character of the, you know, the physical abnormality, if you will. And being a kid where I was getting, you know, I was interested in girls already, you know, and being like, you know, fascinated with the opposite sex. It sounds so weird, you know, being like, you know, we're talking, I would have been like 10 or something when I saw it in the theater in 11, and when me and Willie were watching it in 88. But it was just like I was already, you know, having crushes on girls in school and stuff. So, I mean, it was kind of like this, it was, I think the reason this movie is probably maybe a little more special than a lot of movies to me as a, you know, and being a kid and stuff, it's just the being able to identify with that character of having the physical abnormality and the insecurity that it gave the Steve Martin character in regards to romantic interests. And I really identified with that as a kid. It was something I struggled with, you know, throughout my entire adolescence. And what's interesting about my problem, or my situation that I kind of turned into a problem maybe more than it needed to be, is I think I thought people cared more than maybe people did care. I mean, I probably got bullied and stuff, and people talk about it or ask about it and stuff, but I think looking back, that, you know, my situation physically was more of a social handicap because I made it a social handicap, maybe more than people did. Maybe I, like, you know, maybe I preemptively thought, well, this is what people are think, so I'm going to be on the defensive. I think that's what a lot of, you know, a lot of what I did when I was an adolescent and things in regards to my physical differentness, or however you want to phrase it. But yeah, not so much a movie review so far, but I think it's important to talk about this stuff because this is what the movie makes me think of. And putting the movie on, oh my God. I don't know, I mean, I'm sure there is, but this is probably, watching it again last night for the first time in a year, you know, a while, this might be one of my all-time biggest comfort movies. Like, oh my God. The thing I love about the Steve Martin character is, even though he's got the physical, quote-unquote, abnormality, he's like just the funnest guy in the world, the character. And just, you know, he walks everywhere, looks like he's got an old, you know, Land Rover or Range Rover or something, but he doesn't drive it. Probably doesn't work, that's why. But he walks everywhere. And one thing I loved about this movie, probably even as a kid, if I didn't appreciate it as a kid, I know I did as a teenager. But I think this was filmed in Vancouver, British Columbia. I think it's supposed to be in Colorado. But it's filmed in this absolutely beautiful town. It's just sprawling vistas of trees in the background. An absolutely beautiful town. And that's one of the things that's absolutely amazing about this movie as well. And there's just so much about this movie that I absolutely love, except maybe the opening credit music with presumably a saxophone. But yeah, you know, the character is he's just, you know, this lighthearted, just happy-go-lucky guy. And I guess I can briefly talk about the movie before I end the review. Steve Martin plays CB, is it CB or CD? Bales. He's a police chief, or not the police chief, the fire chief in this town. And he's basically got, you know, a bunch of Michael J. Pollard of Sleepaway Camp 3 fame, and Bonnie and Clyde fame, and Scrooged fame, and Dick Tracy fame. I'm sure he's in all kinds of stuff. He plays one of these goofy, it's a you know, a fire department of misfits. And then, you know, Daryl Hannah, of course, plays Roxanne, this I think she's a college student or something, who rented, I don't know where this college student gets $9,000 to rent a house in 1987. You know, that's a lot of money now for renting a house for the summer. That'd be a lot more money in 1987. So, yeah, she this gorgeous blonde, and for the record, I don't really like blondes, and Never really thought, I mean, I wouldn't have turned Daryl Hannah away, but I never necessarily thought that she was really that amazingly attractive in this movie. Incidentally, I think the first shot of her, the first close-up where she's like looking out the window or whatever, calling for the cat, Grover, it's like the best shot of her. She looks the best, I think, that in that shot out of the whole movie. But so she's this, this student or whatever. You rented the house from Shelley Duvall, who owns, I guess, 5 houses and a business, and I don't know where Shelley Duvall got her money, but no one's ever in her like cafe. No one's in, these people own these businesses in this city, but no one's ever in them, except that bar. And the bar scene, people, whoever owns Shelley Duvall probably owns the bar too, but whoever owns that bar was hopping that night. That the CB. Or CD, I just watched it last night. What the hell is it? CD. Bales did that 20 answers to the question famous scene or whatever. That was just really, talk about extras. I got a lot of extras for that scene. But this movie, thinking about that bar scene, like it really wonderfully captures like the late 80s, just I guess bar scene to a certain extent a little bit, and the fashions obviously, and that one guy who's the mayor has got this like hot ass blonde chick, just like she's just smiling at whatever he says, even though he's an idiot or whatever. But so, and another interesting plot point about this movie is you've got the guy from Top Gun. I think he was just in Top Gun the year before this, and his name is, I don't want to screw it up, it's Rick Rossovich, and I'm not too sure he's been in much other. I'm sure he must have been in more than Top Gun in this movie, but I don't think I've ever seen him in anything else, and that guy's absolutely phenomenal in this movie. Obviously, he's like the hunky frickin'... What I love about this movie is Steve Martin wrote the screenplay based on, I don't think it says it on the back of here, but it's based on some like older tale of some guy. From what I understand, the story that he based it on didn't have a happy ending, and of course, late 80s, romantic comedy, we're going to get a happy ending. It's really amazing. This movie's PG. It's rated PG, and there's some like sexual innuendo stuff and a little bit of cuss words. PG, I was really surprised to see that last night. But Rick Rossovich, if that's how to pronounce his name, is stupendous in this movie. Absolutely stupendous. He plays the idiot like hunk so amazingly in this movie. So he comes into town to this, he's coming into town to work at this fire station. He's like the only like alpha kind of actual competent kind of guy. What's funny about the Rossovich character is it's like on one aspect he's completely stupid and incompetent when it comes to talking to Roxanne or some good looking women in general. And then on one hand, like at the fire station, he seems really, really competent. But I guess when it comes to beautiful women or whatever, he's not, which is ironic because he's like this hunky guy that every woman would, maybe not every woman, but so many women would lust over or whatever, fawn over, including Roxanne in the movie. And the interesting thing about this movie is, of course, it's so great how, oh my God, is this review going to be a week long? Before I comment on that, the beginning of the movie. Him walking to wherever he's walking to. Oh, he's walking to give Shelley Duvall back the tennis racket which he's had for a year and a half, and he just comes for no reason. I don't know why. It's just so funny how we're just gonna have this like fight scene in the beginning of this movie where he just comes across 2 of these assholes and looks like the dead of summer walking up a hill with skis and ski poles. They're just 2 bullies that are like, making fun of this guy, other side of the street, scum. He's a cop. Oh shit. Wait, he's a fireman. If he's a cop, where's his gun? He's a fireman. Ah! It's like the adults are like playing like, freaking grade school kids on the playground or something. I don't know where this scene came from, but at the time I was in like, whatever, grade school or whatever, so it wasn't so foreign to me because I was experiencing that exact thing in life. But watching it as an adult now, you're like, why are these 2 adults who are carrying ski poles and skis in the summer and a case of beer just like acting like bullies on the playground when they come across Steve Martin coming the other way? And that's before they even notice his nose. And then when he notices the nose, it's like all hell breaks loose. But anyway, that scene is so freaking like unexpected and funny and random. And one thing I will say for the the pan and scan VHS is it actually, when he turns around and it's like, whoa, 3D coming at you. In pan and scan, it was almost better because the pan and scan had to go like way over. It went like way over to accommodate the nose, and then came back. So in the actual widescreen version, the frame doesn't like really move, or if it pans over, it's just a little bit, maybe not at all. But because of the widescreen, the camera, and he turns around, it's able to have the whole nose in it when he turns around to face the camera. Pan and scan was actually better because that motion of the camera to have to accommodate it looked like the camera actually had to pan over to accommodate the nose. That's a rare occasion where pan and scan actually, I think, was better than the actual original widescreen version, because that camera motion, or presumed camera motion, of having to accommodate the nose as he turned around made it actually more funny. But I'm not going to do a beat by beat, don't worry. I just wanted to I might have to watch this again soon, because it was just so delightful. You guys probably know, a lot of you know, that my favorite franchise is Friday the 13th, and those movies are in a lot of ways the same thing, just the feel-good comfort movies, and not to mention just the beautiful women and the beautiful locations and the awesome Harry Manfredini music, and just so much I love about, the Friday the 13th movies is just so many of the details of, what goes into them and things. But those movies, like 1 through 7, Friday the 13th, are the same kind of thing. Comfort, food, cinema, love them, can watch them a billion times. I might have to start putting Roxanne on like a rewatch list. I almost want to watch this again tonight, and maybe I probably won't, but I'll probably watch it again soon, because when I rewatched it last night, I was like, oh my God, I love this movie so much. But I guess in closing, I can just simply say, I don't know if I have to say what it's about. I guess I can say briefly what it's about. It's, so this hunk Rick Rossovich comes into town. Roxanne, in a very funny, series of events, Roxanne gets locked out of her house nude, trying to get the cat in, and has to go to the fire station. And Steve Martin, basically gets her back into her house through all these acrobatics. As some double that can do all this acrobatic stuff, and there happens to be just this convenient frickin' acrobatic pole attached to the house she's renting, so he can get up and down and go up and down the house and all, like an acrobatic hero. That was another thing about this movie as a kid that I really liked. I'm sure I knew that it was a double as a kid, but just the character was so positive and funny and acrobatic, and could just do seemingly anything except, like, get the girl, so to speak. But obviously he falls head over heels kind of for Roxanne. And to Steve Martin, did I mention that? Yeah, I mentioned he wrote this, and he executive produced it as well, so he probably had a lot of controlling power on this movie. But so he falls head over heels for Roxanne, and what's great about it is he doesn't make it just about her appearance. Obviously that's a part of it, but the way it unfolds, and the way he seems to get wooed is almost more about what she says, and the romanticism about her interest of being like a astronomer, or astrophysicist, or whatever the hell she is, interested in the stars and looking at the stars with the telescope and stuff. So all getting into that about what she does and stuff, it really intrigues him, and it's just like, God, not only does he think she's really good looking, but I think more than that, he really, she as a person, like spiritually, if you will, or as a personality, as a person, she moved him, I think, more than her physical characteristics, which I'm sure he doesn't hate as well. And the interesting dynamic about this movie is, of course, once she gets a sight of, Rick Rossovich's character. What the hell is his character's name? Yeah, Chris. Once she gets a look at him, it's obviously lust, because she's never really talked to him. So she's just lustful over hunky Chris, and Steve Martin is probably, smitten and probably lustful over Roxanne, and Roxanne does like the Steve Martin character, and Steve Martin really probably ends up getting more and more infatuated and falls in love with the Roxanne character. It's funny how I'm using like actors' names and character names and like pick one or the other, buddy, but I'm just rolling with the punches when I do these videos. But it becomes an interesting like web of like, who likes who and what, and for a minute there it seems like she might like Steve Martin character, but alas, she likes this guy and she wants Steve Martin since he works with them to hook her up with Chris. And meanwhile, Chris, even though he's all hunky and studly and stuff, gets nervous and throws up when he has to even has the idea of having to talk to beautiful women, and which is just interesting. And it does make you wonder if it's like a way of Steve Martin like kind of working out just his I don't know what angst or stuff regarding good-looking men. Like, I'm gonna have this good-looking man just be so impotent in regards to like he's everything so many women want, but I'm gonna make this character like kind of like the character in Clockwork Orange, where he's gonna get sick at the thought of even talking to a woman, let alone going on a date or whatever. And it's absolutely, this movie's kind of got two parts where it's like this, meeting and getting, Steve Martin meeting and getting smitten with Roxanne, and then once, then it seems like, well, maybe Roxanne's going to be interested in Steve Martin back, and then it's like, oops, no, she's interested in Chris. And then the second main part of the movie is like basically the whole, Steve Martin, please, would you help me, get set up with Chris or whatever, and all the stuff, all the drama and stuff that ensues after that. And yeah, I think I've seen this in movies either after or something similar, but maybe that movies that were made either before or after or stuff or something. But yeah, oh my God, the humor that comes out of this situation where it's like, obviously Steve Martin character can do pretty much anything. He's kind of like the chick in Force Awakens who can just do anything. But in addition to being a gymnast and a whatever, kung fu with a tennis racket and whatever else he wants to do, being able to sniff out frickin' fires or whatever else he can do, being really good at ad-libbing 20 answers to the big nose thing or whatever. In addition to being able to do all kinds of amazing stuff, he's also a very eloquent and extemporaneous writer. I don't know, I should have looked up what that word is. I don't even know if I said it right, it probably didn't even say it right, but I think it's allergies. Like sometimes stuff gets in my eyes and they just want to water and water and water, so I think that's what's going on. But with my watering eye, but forget a water hole, it's a water eye. But in addition to being able to do everything else, he can also write very eloquently. So what he ends up doing is having to write, not having to, but he foolishly gets suckered into writing these love letters for Chris. So it ends up getting Daryl Hannah character, nice, I've been saying Roxanne, now I'm saying Daryl. Roxanne, getting her all hot. So like on what's supposed to be the first date, she beds down with them and they do it like two and a half, they screw 2.5 times, and which is very disturbing for it's the CD Bales, CB, it just comes off the tongue because hey big brother, come back, what's happening? CD, the Steve Martin character, it's allergies. So that's very distraught. I mean, imagine having this woman you're head over heels for, and you basically, you seduce her for this other guy to go up into the house and screw her 2.5 times. Like, how demoralizing is that? It's just an all-around goofy situation. So what ultimately ends up happening is like you have to have, in pretty much every romantic comedy, or I think almost every comedy in general, is you have to have that, that period in the last third of the movie where it goes bad. So, Shelley Duvall, thanks a lot for your intervention. She ends up basically spilling the beans to Roxanne that Steve Martin has been... I love how I'm using some character names and then the performer names. That's just so sloppy. But anyway, it just spills the beans to Roxanne about how Steve Martin is just so crazy about her, and that makes, then there's a confrontation where she kind of gets, asks him over so she can bitch him out for doing that. Like, because of you, I slept with this guy, and I was all hot and bothered about this guy. One thing I want to say, and this even happened when I rewatched it, it's like as a kid I didn't understand it at all, and it's almost hard to understand as an adult. But like when she goes away for whatever reason, it makes absolutely no sense why she went away. It's just for a plot point or whatever. But when she goes away and Steve Martin's writing the letters, I think you see her like read them 2 or 3 times, and like every time she's having this reaction where it's almost annoyance, but what I guess it is the letters are so hot that she's just getting more and more, just turned on and sexually frustrated. I think that's what's going on when you see those progressions of her reading the letters. And it looks like when I was a kid, I thought she was annoyed by how many letters she's getting. And even as an adult, like until you hear her talk about it later, like, oh, I came back early because basically, I want to screw you now, relating to Chris because she thought he was writing them. Like when she's getting them, it's hard to convey, if you don't know what's, you know, being said or whatever. But it looks like she's getting annoyed with the letters. But anyway, at the end, sometime in the last third, obviously there's that confrontation, and it looks like he said. Chris goes away. What was really cool about this movie, and it's really true to life because it's a great explanation of like how many different personalities and stuff there are in people. Because Chris, really had a easy time talking to that bartender chick who was going to go to Tahoe or whatever to be a waitress or whatever that she was going to do. So there was this scene towards the end of the movie where, they end up, he's just easy to talk to her, and they're on the same level. And this movie's a really good, it's kind of like that line in Annie Hall where he's walking around and meets those two couples, or that couple, and he's like, how do you guys manage to stay together? Well, I'm boring and don't really have anything interesting to say, and the guy's like, I'm exactly the same way. So it's like they have this perfect relationship because they're boring as shit. And that's kind of in a little bit of a way what Steve Martin was doing with the other characters with that. I'm not going to say that that the waitress chick, bartender chick was stupid, but I mean it's a way to say that these people are on the same level. And I think in a way, yeah, they're stupider than Roxanne and the C.D. Bales characters, but that I even understood that a lot when I was a kid, when I first saw it. Like, okay, the reason this isn't working is because, Chris isn't on Roxanne's level intellectually. Sure, they can get together and have sex, but it's never going to work because they're just, quote unquote, well, I guess we can say intellectually just two different situations. So, Steve Martin and I should say C.D. Bales and Roxanne, of course, at the end of the day, get together. And what's really cool, the way Steve Martin does it, is sometime early on in the film, there's this fat kid who's sitting up on the roof, and he's like, they call me Porky at school, and this kid's all depressed or whatever. I think this scene is more or less setting up the way he's going to end the movie, where Steve Martin is upset about Roxanne finding out that he's been writing the letters and being bawled out by her, that at the very end of the movie, he's on the top of his roof. And I got to tell you, I didn't necessarily remember that until the camera panned up and there he is, and it's a little bit of a tearjerker. Like, oh man, that's really, it kind of, like I say, that other scene is probably there just to set up the ending, but that's really poignant. Now Steve Martin once earlier on was sent up to help get a kid down off a roof, and now he's on a roof himself. It's kind of like the coping mechanism for a couple of characters in this movie. Very poignant. And of course, like I say, the story or the basic gist of the movie, or the story that this movie's based off of, from what I understand, didn't have a happy ending, and I personally find those to be more satisfying. But, it's Hollywood, it's a Daryl Hannah, Steve Martin movie, we gotta give it a happy ending. And honestly, I appreciated the happy ending as a kid, because I was like, oh, maybe there's some hope for me in the old romanticism department. Turns out, luckily for me, there was some hope for me, which I'm grateful for. And, all's well and ends well. And, the way he's got it, the way he does it, where she appears and starts to, kind of try to, like, be poetic to him and stuff, and I love your nose and all this kind of stuff. And before I end the review, I will say that there's also another poignant aspect of the movie where several times, I guess, throughout the course of his life, he thought about getting a nose job. And in a scene in the movie, he goes into the guy and he's like, okay, cut it off, you know, give me a great nose or whatever. And the guy, the surgeon guy or whatever, I don't quite understand, like he doesn't want to do it or whatever. Maybe he feels like it's too big of a job, haha, to tackle or something. But the guy's a really kind of cool character, because he's like, you know, did it ever occur to you that you got this nose for a reason? And of course that sets up the very end of the movie, where he could smell the fire in the barn that they're keeping that stupid cow in, and saves the cow's life and saves the city, and you know, so he was meant to have it. And that was another kind of another little plot point of the movie that was added onto the movie. So, you know, just accept, this would be a good tale for kids, young people now. Just accept, you know, that the way you are, and that you were born the way you were born for a reason, and if you weren't meant to be this way, you wouldn't be this way. And maybe a good movie for the youth to view nowadays. But yeah, obviously, it's a no-brainer. This is one of my all-time just comfort, feel-good, just turn it on and be swept away into a happy place movie. Obviously, it's an easy 4 out of 4 stars movie for me. You know, it's funny because I don't think about this movie a lot at all. And then watching it again last night, I mean, I can honestly say this is definitely one of my favorite movies that I don't know, I didn't really realize necessarily it was one of my favorite movies. It was kind of like one of those things where it was like so obvious I don't have to, you know, think about it specifically. But yeah, Roxanne, it's right up there with whatever, you know, just I guess National Lampoon's Vacation as being one of the all-time just comfort movies that helped me get through some of my more difficult adolescent years and nights and stuff, and fall asleep. I would imagine I fell asleep to this as well, you know. Just the soothing sounds of the scenes from the, you know, these movies just help me get to sleep and things. But it's just I just don't understand it, you know. I can sleep relatively good as an adult now. It's really sad, like, God, thinking back on it, you know, being 10 and 11 and stuff, like I couldn't sleep. Like, Jesus, I must have been a nervous wreck or whatever. But yeah, this movie is very, very, very important to me. And like I say, Rick, I don't know, I can only assume Rick Rossovich is in more than Top Gun and Roxanne, but, you know, I don't think he was in Top Gun Maverick. It would have been cool to have him being in Top Gun Maverick. I don't know if he's still around or alive or whatever, but if he is, it would have been cool to see him in that. And from what I understand, they're doing a Top Gun 3, so maybe he could be in that. That'd be really cool. But some actors just walk away, which is commendable. I mean, that's really kind of cool when an actor can do a couple of successful movies or whatever, or a handful of successful movies, and it's just like, you know what, that's all I need to do. You know, I'm good. I always think that's really interesting and cool when that happens as well. But anyway, this is, if you watch this whole thing, you were kind of treated to a different kind of review. It was like, most of it was just kind of my history with the movie and just what it means to me in the place that it's always held ever since it existed. And I can remember that second run theater my dad and I saw it at. My dad tried to get, you know, he talked to the owner or whatever and tried to get the poster for from this movie, you know, from them, you know. And I guess someone else requested it already, but he did end up later on, around the same time, maybe a year or two later, he did end up getting the Young Guns poster from that same theater for me. So that was cool. I can't remember if I can't remember if we saw Young Guns in the theater. He might have just got the poster because it was a cool poster, and then I'd see it later on home video. But yeah, my dad, you know, that's also a huge part of the reason why, you know, this movie is so special, you know, seeing it with him for the very first time, and that memory of him being like, hey buddy, I'll try to get that poster from the, you know, from the theater, see if I can get my name on the list or whatever. And just those little details, you know, that that helped to make this movie just, I guess, as important as it's always been and continues to be for me. So if you watch this whole video, all I can say is thank you so much for doing so. If you didn't, you're not hearing this part of it anyway, unless you just skip to the end or whatever. But thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. I can only assume you did if you watched the whole thing. And as always, we'll catch you on the next video.